Hi everyone, so this is the second and final video that I'll be posting this week on Captain Fantastic and No Country for Old Men. The plan today in this video is to conclude on a few points that I discussed yesterday. I thought I left the video a bit abruptly, and there's a few key points around the context of No Country that I want to just conclude with. I'm then going to move on to talk about the institutional context of Captain Fantastic. When I say talk about, I mean just basically give you some key points that you need to know. And then finally just bring together some points on spectatorship theory that I feel are essential, and I'll try and relate them to some of the lesson tasks that you've completed over the last couple of weeks. On that note, what I've decided is that these two videos that I've posted are going to be the main kind of structure of the lessons for this week. If you go to lesson 1, on the Google Classroom for this week, you'll see on slide 4 that there's the task, and what I basically want you to do is just simply take some notes down, some key revision notes on exam expectations that I've talked about in the first video, the institutional context of No Country and the institutional context of Captain Fantastic, and then the key points on spectatorship theory. So this is just really kind of a recap and revision type of video. It's something a bit different than just copying off slides. As I did in the previous video, I'll add in some intertitles, some text, some pictures, so you know what is on screen is important. But really your task is to just follow the guidance on slide 4, or the last slide of lesson 1, and just submit some key notes from these two videos, as well as the independent task in the booklet for this Friday. Any questions, please just get in touch via email. And as I said yesterday in the last lesson, if this continues to work and is productive, I'll make some more videos going forward, etc, etc. So to start the video, I just want to conclude with what I talked about yesterday in relation to No Country for Old Men, and then push on into Captain Fantastic. Okay, so yesterday I ended the video by talking about audience expectations in relation to the production and institutional context of No Country for Old Men, and I said that although this is our mainstream film, it is marketed and distributed by a company that is a sort of off-branch studio to Paramount that specialises in attracting independent audiences. So the reason why I wanted to kind of come back and talk about that and just summarise is to talk about audience expectations. So what we need to take into account, folks, is that this is a film that is aimed at both mainstream and independent audiences. I mentioned the Coen brothers and how they have a sort of cult following, but also how they attract mainstream audiences as well. And when we relate this to spectatorship theory and we think about, you know, how our audience is going to react, this is really important. So, you know, yes, this film might shock people when they see Anton killing the police officer in the first few minutes, but also those that are accustomed to Coen brothers films will know that violence, if you refer back to those auteur lessons, is really a kind of staple ingredient, if you like, of the Coen brothers auteur style. So what we really need to get to understanding here, folks, is that No Country for Old Men is a film that offers both active and passive spectatorship in many different ways, and particularly that it's both a mainstream and independent film. It offers different positions. Now if we put that also to the fact that, you know, the Coen brothers have a massive following and that they have their specific ways in which they direct films, you know, there's going to be different ways in which audiences react. You know, what we can really say from this is that this film doesn't offer fixed viewing positions. Depending on who you are going to react very differently to different parts of this film. So that's really important. So what we need to say here, folks, to kind of pull this together, is that viewing positions for No Country for Old Men are not fixed, simply because of the nature of the directors and the fact that this is a film that's aimed at both mainstream and independent audiences. Okay, so moving swiftly on, this next part of the video is going to talk about the institutional context of Captain Fantastic. So we know that Captain Fantastic is certainly our independent film on specification, and there are many reasons as to why this is an independent film. So we know that the budget was between 5 and 6 million. We know that it was produced and marketed by independent production companies. Also, there was a lot of individual producers who came together to help fund the film. So we've got individuals putting their own money into production as opposed to big companies such as Paramount, kind of funding these films. And also, what we need to consider is the fact that this was a film that was put on the American Independent Film Festival circuit. The film festival circuit for independent productions is really, really important. The Sundance Festival in particular is kind of like a stable sort of festival for American independent features, and the general notion is that if you're an independent filmmaker and your film does not get premiered or shown at Sundance, then you're not really worth your salt. And that the film, it hasn't done very well. There's a lot to consider when we think that this film, Captain Fantastic, was help funded by someone who does have very close ties and influence on the Sundance Film Festival. Okay, well, what makes an independent film? Well, what we need to consider is what would we see in an independent film. And the first thing is location shooting. And this really relates back to the institutional context around the production of the films, in that they have very small budgets. Often a director will not have access to a variety of different locations. They may also not have access to a studio set, so they're limited in where they can shoot. So often what we're going to see is real life day-to-day location settings, and this is also to perhaps position themselves away from commercial sort of glossy Hollywood films that might use sets and that might look really kind of like visually spectacular compared to more realistic settings. If we think about Captain Fantastic, the opening of the film is set in a national park up in Seattle, where Matt Ross really does make use of location shooting. Although yes, it is very, very beautiful to look at, and it could perhaps come from a mainstream film. This is location shooting at its finest. Okay, so moving on, the next point that I want to consider about independent films, independent productions, is the fact that they will often deal with unconventional and challenging subject matter. So we're talking about narratives and plots and stories that perhaps differ from mainstream films, themes that are there to challenge the audience, themes that are there to critique society, and really get the audience thinking, as well as create often a sort of socially aware cinema, and that's basically a film that will critique the conditions in which it's been made and will have something to say about the current political climate. For example, we've said that Captain Fantastic is critical of the Republican Party and Donald Trump, who came to power in 2015, 16. So we're talking about a film that deals with and critiques contemporary American politics. Okay, and just on that final point, just to sort of summarise before we move on to spectatorship, what I want to do is just give you a quick quote from Jeff King, who has wrote a book on American independent cinema. I will be giving some reading out around this when we return as a class. But what he sort of says, hopefully the quote should appear, if I've done this right, is that American cinema is there to kind of be hospitable and open to new radical ideas that challenge the status quo. And what he means by that is that American independent cinema is there to be politically charged, it's there to be different, and it's there to say something about society. Okay, so the final part of the video, and perhaps the most important, is basically just a little brief discussion around spectatorship theory. I introduced the theory a couple of weeks ago when we started these two films, and I haven't said anything about it. I've just set some slides with sort of some key information on. So what I want to do very briefly is just kind of go over what you need to know, and hopefully this should give some clarity as well going forward. And then that's really it for the rest of this video and for the lessons this week. Okay, so first things first, spectatorship theory, as has been mentioned numerous times on the slides, is an umbrella term for lots of different theories about the ways in which audiences engage with media and films. Those of you that do media studies will be aware of some of the theories. These won't be new. For those that only do film at the college, What you basically need to know is it's an umbrella theory that looks at different ways in which audiences consume media. So if we think about film, one thing that we need to consider and what is really important is that audiences are heterogeneous. Now, heterogeneous is just a posh word for the fact that audiences are never the same. Although you might have a similar reaction to a film, a jump scare, or if something really horrendous happened in a film and we agree that it was, it was wrong, audiences are going to react differently to different sequences. So audiences are never the same. Okay, and a context point around this. Audiences will react differently because of their different social and cultural expectations. At the start of the video, I briefly mentioned how a fan of the Coen Brothers might react differently to someone who's never seen a Coen Brothers film before when they watched a sequence with Anton in or another part of the film. But social and cultural issues around an audience are what is going to influence their viewing. So, for example, when we're talking about social and cultural issues, we mean their upbringing, their education, their job, their tastes and preferences. So really what we're saying here is that there's loads of different factors that influence how an audience is going to react to a film. So to bring this all together and to summarise spectatorship theory and the video, what we really need to know is that audiences are split into active and passive spectators. We know from the lesson slides that active spectators are there to critique, they're there to engage, challenge, and they're there to form their own opinions about a film based on their social, cultural, and motives for watching a film. So active audiences are people like yourselves, film students, film critics, often independent audiences who are going to watch something that they're going to be challenged, where they want to be challenged, and really anyone who doesn't want to sit back, kick back, and watch something for entertainment. So active audiences are there to challenge, interpret, engage, and take up viewer positions. That's really, really important. Passive audiences, on the other hand, and this is something that perhaps people didn't really get from the tasks that have been set, are there for entertainment purposes. They're there to sit and eat popcorn and to forget about the problems that they have while they engage in something. When we think of hypodermic needle theory, we consider passive audiences as audiences who will just accept what they're being told. They will not critique, they will not take up positions. They are there to be scared, they are there to relate to characters in very much an emotional way where they don't take a stand back and think, well, hang on, is Ben's parenting skills right? They're very much there to just be consumed by the film. What they see, they take and accept. So really what we're talking about here is someone who just sits in the cinema or who sits at home and just watches for no other reason than to just simply be entertained and engage from an entertainment perspective. So that's really important, and that's a passive audience. So yeah, folks, any problems, any issues, please just email me, get in touch. My normal email is working again, so please email me on that. So yeah, thanks for watching. These are your videos to keep for revision, and I shall hopefully see you shortly.